Hello there, my friend. Welcome back to the studio. Now, this tutorial has it all. It is jam-packed with everything from start to finish. Now, just so you know, I am on Patreon at patreon.com/tgtheartist. For this video, longer version, and any other, please visit patreon.com/tgtheartist. Now, as usual, I begin with preparing the canvas by toning it, and this is to help me knock out any white that would otherwise show through on the final piece. Now here, after the toning, after applying the painting layer for the toning process, I wipe off the excess to kind of reduce the overdoing effect of the darkness, because I do not want it to be too dark. So by wiping it using a dry cloth, I achieve that intendo in my mind. As you can see here, I have the surface that I intend to work on. Moving forward, I'd like to show you my painting palette that has red crimson, ivory black, titanium white, yellow lemon hue, cobalt blue, burnt umber, and a little bit of ultramarine blue. This is the flat Bristol brush that I'll be using to sketch the outline. As you can see, I'm already beginning with that process of the sketching, and this is to just map out the torso area. This process of mine, I don't really have a specific person I can point to that uses this very process, though I'd assume that some of the old masters actually used this process of mine. It is not too dissimilar from what they did by toning down the canvas and drawing the outline to kind of form that base structure that the first Blockin layer would go through. Now, as for me, I prefer doing this because this gives me a roadmap of where to lay my paint pigments, because otherwise I wouldn't really do it in a fluid manner. This saves time. Ordinarily, I'd begin with the background of any portrait, but for this one, I'd like to just get straight to it and begin painting the figure, because I feel as though it's going to save me a lot of time as well. I mean, there are some pros and cons, but for today, I just feel as though I just need to get straight to it. I can't wait for the background at this point. I just want to get to it. And it's allowed, it's art. You know, you can try something new. I'm not used to this. I don't do this as much, but today, I'm going to do it for you and show you how it's done. You hear people say, how do you eat an elephant? By biting it one bite at a time, right? So here I'm laying the first brush strokes that will form the entirety of this thing. And as you can imagine, you cannot paint the whole thing at once. You have to start from somewhere. Now here, it's a mix of burnt umber, a bit of deep yellow, and a touch of titanium white to kind of establish that Blockin foundational layer. And I'm beginning with the neck here, as you can see. Now, as we are not gonna talk about any other part of the body and just talk about the torso today, the female torso, as you can see, I already painted the head just above the neck, but I'm not going to show that. That is in an earlier video that I already shared a few days ago. And here, I just want to show you how I handled the rest of the body. And in specific talk, I'm going to talk about the torso. Now, I'm going to begin here with the neck. And as you can see, I'm rendering everything all at once together. So the different tones that I bring in, I'm making them go together seamlessly as though they are not separated by zones. And I do this to save myself time and really to kind of just know where everything goes all at once. I do not want to waste any time. And as you can see, this is real speed, and I do not intend to take forever doing the neck, because quite frankly, if I were to state my case here, I'd just say painting the neck is not my favorite place to be working on, and I'd rather be painting something else, maybe the hand, maybe the legs, or even the torso itself, because that's the interesting part. But because we cannot skip the neck, and there's no torso without the neck, so here comes the neck. As you can see, I'm using varying tones. There's some parts that are lighter than the others, and I balance them nicely with close keenness to my reference, because I do not want to do something that's going to seem unnatural. You have to have that reference where you get your inspiration, you draw your inspiration from. As you can see on the side of the screen here, I am closely following my reference to lay these tones, and as these tones are laid, they come in zones. So these zones have to be separated by some sort of blurriness in between. I'm not gonna just put hard edges here, because like I said, I want to do this thing as fast as possible, because we only have an hour here, at least on the tutorial. So we want to go as fast as we can. This is why you're seeing me rendering as I go, so as to save some time. In my previous video, I also mentioned something that goes like, I do not get scared to use very bright tones as I paint. Bright tones are supposed to come last, but sometimes you have to break your rules and really enjoy the process. And the reason why sometimes I prefer to start with the lighter tones like you're seeing here is because for this painting I employed a sculptural process rather than just painting traditionally, like beginning with the darker tones, then mid-tones, and then the highlights. So with sculptures, or say sculpting, you begin by kind of revealing the figure from the outside in, like a marble block. And in my previous video, I referenced the artist Michelangelo. He was a very intelligent painter back in the 16th century, and he used a technique known as sculpting to kind of reveal the figure hidden in the marble block. And that was in dealing with marble. This is paint. He also knew how to paint, but he preferred sculpting than painting. But I prefer the reverse. I prefer painting than sculpting, because honestly speaking, in my country where I live in, there's no abundant supply of marble block. If you come across marble block, that's just some kind of miracle. So my favorite and most accessible medium happens to be oil paintings. So this is why I've kind of honed my skill, and I'm able to really articulate my thought process as I work on it. So as you can see here, I'm adding some highlights to really delineate between the cool surface from the highlighted surface, and just blend in between to kind of show that transition of light between the area that catches the light the most before that area that has a little less light. And as a matter of fact, I'm not afraid to say that I'm using pure titanium white, scooping it straight from the canvas, from the palette, and applying it on top of there, because it is a wet-on-wet technique at this point for the Blockin. It's gonna mix with the painting underneath for it to actually bring out a tone that I expect it to bring. It's not necessarily going to register as super white as you'd expect with titanium white, because titanium white is a pure white color. So basically I'm mixing my oils on the canvas surface as I paint by letting the paint quality kind of determine that mixing, or should I say viscosity on the surface. So as I proceed here, you can see I'm kind of just playing with my tones at this point. I really don't overthink anything. I'm just doing that which I feel is natural to me, as I pay really close attention to my reference, because at the end of the day, it is the reference that I'm trying to emulate. I'm trying to create that sculptural feel on this painting of mine, just as you would expect a natural photo to look, though at the end of the day it's still gonna look like a painting, because you know, a painting has a painting quality and a photo is a photo quality. Plus, I do not paint hyper realistically. I just paint realistically, something believable to mirror the natural appearance of the human figure. Now carrying on, I'm just dropping my tones a little bit by mixing a little bit of burnt umber, red crimson and deep yellow to form this color here that you see me mix. And let me mention, it also has a tad bit of ultramarine blue, because there's a deep and almost unnoticeable green in there that you won't see from the onset, but I'll make it more obvious when I layer on the subsequent layers. But for now, I'm just going to go with this, and I feel as though this is pretty good for me, and it's going to create that sculptural spherical feel on this sphere upon the chest. There are two spheres upon the chest after all, and two of them are 3D, three-dimensional. So there are two circles, two spheres, and you understand what I mean. Moving on, I really delineate between that warmer shadow in the middle of the chest area, and you can see there's a subtle blending going on. Now towards the left side of the chest, where we find the second sphere, I use more burnt umber on top of what I already had. That was red crimson, deep yellow, and a tad bit of ultramarine blue, but now I added a lot more burnt umber in there to kind of make it appear darker and catch more shadow. The shadow effect cast by some surrounding bodily features that cast their shadow upon that area. And as you can see, it's a free process and it goes as rapidly as possible. No time wastage. Do not second guess your brush handling. It is supposed to be a fun process. It is supposed to be something freeing and liberating. It is supposed to make you feel good about your painting technique. And do not be afraid if you feel as though your result is not quite to the level you want it to be, because at the end of the day, this is something to stick with. It is something you do deliberately, honestly, willingly, and consistently, or should I add on top of that list, persistently, until you find that result that you're looking for. And as for me, this technique of mine shows you how to fast achieve that effect. And this is straight on from the Blockin process, because believe it or not, this is the first layer and we haven't really advanced to the second layer yet. So as I said earlier, this is the wet on wet technique, and we are laying wet paint on top of wet paint, varying tones and really creating that sculptural effect to create something believable right from the onset, and so that every feature can register to the eyes and really show you what you're looking at. And that way we create something believable. Now right under the right sphere here, I have added a darker tone, which is clearly burnt umber, and on top of it I'm now laying a color that is a mixture of deep yellow, burnt umber, and a tad bit of red crimson. Titanium white is also in there, so that's what I put in there, and there's some burnt umber there as well to kind of make it a mid-tone. Now, as you can see, I'm varying my tones, and my brush is kind of rendering between these zones to have that curvy effect, that left to right spherical effect of transformation in the midriff area just below the two spheres of the chest. This is a warmer tone that I'm applying here. It's the same tone that I applied in the middle of that broad mid-tone just above. And right below that, I'm using a mixture of some crimson red and a tad bit of burnt umber, some more of that ultramarine blue inside, and some deep yellow as well. I'm just scribbling my brush softly across that surface to really create that skin texture right from the onset, though this is not going to be our final layer. And if I were to kind of just paint loosely and if I were in an art competition, I'd use this very technique to kind of render everything seamlessly, even though it's just a light layer and it doesn't necessarily involve too much detail. But this is the technique I'd use, for a competition, to say a portrait of the year kind of competition. I'd use this kind of technique. Now, I'm just gonna, hatch my brush across the surface like that to really create that softness and to render with the varying tones upon that surface. It is very important to observe your tones as you look at your reference and work away or chip away at the studio like I'm doing right now. Because that way you create something believable, and there are practical lights, practical shadow effects. Everything is right on place as it should be. And we haven't really gone that far. We are 17 minutes in, and this is still the Blockin layer. As you can imagine, the process of oil painting can be a bit tedious if you let it be, but in my case, I'm trying to enjoy it as much as possible. So it is pretty reasonable of me to be at this stage as I am right now, because where else should I be? I'm trying to enjoy the process as much as possible and really render this skin texture into something that I'll be happy with as I proceed to the subsequent layers, as we are still in the Blockin. Now I'm just reworking the half bottom part of that left sphere to really create that sculptural effect on it by lifting the tones a little bit. Now, meaning that is the mid-tone, and just right below it are something less than mid towards the darker tones, to delineate between the zones and to create that sculptural feel of that sphere. Now, I render between zones even further to create some bit of softness in there and to create some believable skin texture for me, even at the Blockin. There's no problem with that. I mean, for this painting in particular, I had to do this because I was really enjoying the process and I wanted to just bring that sculptural feel with me from the very onset, even as I thought about the subsequent layers that were coming ahead, and we are about to talk about them as well. With me, you will realize that I never really focus on one area of a painting. I don't believe in tunnel vision ideology. I prefer looking at the paint wholesomely. So I work from zone to zone without really paying keen attention and, sequential, respectable zone painting. No, I go from one area, I go from bottom, I go to left, I go to top, I come back to the middle, and that's how I do it. To really be free with yourself, just play with it, like children play. They are all over the place, they are in the house, they are outside, they're in the kitchen, they're in the bedroom. That's what I'm doing here. And it is all beautiful regardless, because at the end of the day, you realize that there's a formula in that madness. There's a method to the madness. So once I know I have my method spot on, there's nothing that could possibly hinder me from achieving that result which I aim for. Now here I'm still carrying on with the rendering process between the zones. As you can see, I render because by rendering it brings the skin all together and it seems as though it is one veil without divisiveness. It is all in synchrony. I'm trying to bring everything all together like a note of music. Might I share with you a secret here? The old masters, such as John Singer Sargent, used this technique. And I'm only a follower of my predecessor, John Singer Sargent, among many other artists such as Velasquez and many others as well that I can't say their names from the top of my head used. As you can see here, I have laid a brighter tone on this part to really catch that light. This part is gonna take an effect of light catching the skin, and I'm adding a little bit of red here, red and white, so as to create a pink effect just right below the, should I call it clavicle? That's the clavicle, right? My anatomy students, please let me know down in the comments. I'm looking at my reference, and there's a secret here that I already mentioned in the earlier stages of my previous painting video tutorial. I said the head upon this body is not really the head of this body. It's like a Photoshop kind of head. No, I took a different head that I generated via my own means, and I placed on this natural appearing body, which was taken by consent. So this is why I was trying to put a head that doesn't belong to the same body, and it's kind of challenging, but if you have your anatomy knowledge under your sleeves, it comes in handy in such situations, because I'm able to kind of know what size of head shape am I supposed to put on the shoulders, And here, as you can see, I placed a darker tone previously, and now I'm laying a warmer tone here, because with that, it's gonna form that shadow effect. As you can see now that I've rendered everything, you can see the reason as to why I did that. And I rendered just right in the middle. I do not spare paint. I use a lot of paint in the Blockin if I choose to. There are some instances when I prefer to use smaller quantities, but in this situation, I just opted to use a lot of paint, Now I'm laying a little bit more of that titanium white on top of that shoulder over there to really show how that light brings things into focus and really sculpts the form and shows you what goes where, and really form that slope of a curve that goes from the front of the chest to the back of the shoulder, to the front, to the middle front. Now, forget about me touching that hair, because honestly speaking, this video is not about that hair. It's more about the torso, but because the torso is in conjunction with the head, I had to show that brush process as well. So I'm adding a lot more titanium white to the right shoulder to really show the area that is more exposed to the environment lighting than the lower extremities. This is done to really sculpt that shoulder into view and perspective. Now, I'll continue to say this. It is not a bad thing to begin sculpting from the outside in. Now, when you do that, you use very light tones. As you can see, I scribbled my way through this part of the arm here using a very bright tone, almost white, but it's not white. There's some little bit of beige tone there mixed with white, and that's why that middle area looked brighter than the rest of the areas. And I'm sculpting my way around the form of the hand, and this part around here, it's a bit of that burnt umber inside, and you could substitute that with burnt sienna instead, because it's lighter than burnt umber, and mix it a little bit with some titanium white and a tad bit of yellow lemon hue. And that is what I'm using to really sculpt this side of the arm. As you can see, I'm blending as I go. I really don't want to take too much time coming back to the blocking. Once I'm done with the blocking, I'm not coming back. Believe you me, I'm trying to save as much time as possible because I have several paintings to work on and and videos to also share with you. I've added a little bit titanium white on top of that to bring out that spherical effect upon the arm so as to really carve it into existence and three-dimensionality. It is really beginning to take its form here and look as I intend for it to look, and this is in line with the reference that I have. Please always take care of your reference photos. They are very important. You have to pay very keen interest on those. Now, I am on the, should I say the, am I allowed to say thighs? I'm not sure. So I'll just paint, and you know what we're talking about already. So I'm just going to put that darker tone there and play with my tones varyingly here and render in between zones as I go. So this is what I always talk about. It is a secret of mine whereby sometimes I begin with the darker tones and lift my highlights slower. From the darker tones to the mid tones and then the highlights. Sorry about that. So here, because it's the lower extremities, I'd rather go for the darker tones first and then delineate between the zones that kind of catch the ambient light around the environment. So here I've lifted my tone slightly using a lot more yellow in there, and that's the lemon yellow hue. And this mid area here is really catching the shadow, and the shadow is cast by the left leg. As you can see, you'll see how the shadow gets cast, because right above this I'm going to use some titanium white, like you've seen there. And it's a mixture of titanium white and very subtle burnt umber and a tad bit of yellow lemon hue. I really respect my highlights, so I do not overdo anything here. This is titanium white and red crimson, and it forms some pinky effect. As I climb higher from the lower extremities, you'll note that above it all, I'll use a much brighter tone to really sculpt this thing, because it goes around, you see? It goes around. So that three-dimensional effect is very key in capturing the likeness of that part of the leg. Now, please visit thomasgeorgearts.com/book to share your painting challenges and to learn from me in a manner of coaching to really find out what challenges you when you try to create a painting. Do you want to improve your painting process? thomasgeorgearts.com/book is the best thing you could possibly click on right now. Now, as you can see, I've lifted my highlights already, And there's that sculptural effect being achieved here in real time. It is a kind of strategic way of slashing my brush across the surface, and it is not slow in any way possible. It is very rapid. And this is how I like it. I do not want to waste my time on a single painting, and yet there's many things to do in the studio. So for this purpose, especially if you want to paint a painting fast, this is what to do. Do this, you know? And in painting fast, it really rewires your brain. It makes you have a different perspective in painting. And also, honestly speaking, it makes you a better painter. If you can learn to paint fast, snappily, fast judgment. Don't overthink anything. Just do it, That's how you improve. Do not overthink anything. Just do it and use bold brush strokes. And then render in between the zones. You'll be fine. Believe me, I know. Why? Because I've done it so many times and I'm doing it right now. So, as you can see, I'm rendering as I go. This is a constant thing I do. So, my edges, I'm not going to talk about the edges too much here, but what I can tell you is that it is very important to try to be as subtle with your edges as possible. Try to render and make it soft, because the edges can be rough, yes, but for the human body, the edges are never that hard edges. They're supposed to be smooth and soft, They're supposed to be they're supposed to convey some sort of curvy effect, a curve that goes around to sculpt a sphere, some sort of cone or cylinder. They go around the form infinitely, so there's no hard edges here. They're supposed to be soft edges. Always vary your tones if you choose this technique of mine, which is very immediate, might I add. That is why if you choose to paint like this and you would like to really have this in your toolbox, then I suggest visiting thomasgeorgearts.com/book and let's talk about it. Tell me what really challenges you. Is it painting the human form? Is it painting the face? Is it painting the knees, the elbows? Is it painting the chest areas, the sphere in the chest? Is it painting the belly area? What is it? What's the challenge? Is it time? Is it how you handle your brush? What problem do you have? Please share down in the comments. And visit my website /book. Here, again, I'm really not afraid to use, brighter tones to begin my painting process, as you can see here. I am bold with it. And that's what you have to do. Do not spare your painting pigments. Use them boldly with confidence. Believe in yourself. You can do this. This blueprint that I'm laying for you here is a proper guide for you to follow and improve your painting process. Now, as you can see, it is a real-time kind of painting. You can slow things down a little bit, sometimes even take a pause, Just click on the pause button, look at your color palette, see if you have the right mixes, and lay your brush steadily and confidently upon the surface of the canvas. Now here I'm trying to map out the hip area alongside the joint area that goes all the way to the right thigh. I'm playing with my tones again, applying them varyingly, using the midtones first, and then lifting my highlights gradually as I go. I pay very close attention to my edges so as not to overdo or to overspill my paint application. over the areas which I do not want the paint to touch. Now, I have lowered my eye level. I am down here, as you can see, and I am now beginning to slow down a little bit because, when dealing with the edges, you can't rush that quickly. If it were the middle areas, then I'd go swoosh, swoosh, and we are done. But because we're dealing with the edges here, and I'm really trying to avoid crossing the borderlines of my initial sketch, I shall slow down a little bit and really pay my respects to that, and so as to avoid any turmoil ahead when it comes to spillover effect that I want to avoid. Now, this stone I'm adding right in the middle is a blend here between the lighter tone and the darker tone. It is right in the middle. As I lower myself down, I render as I go, just as earlier, and I place my tones strategically as I render. This is something that could be a proper skill set in your hands, because can you imagine mastering how to use varying tones all at once without overdoing anything, and making that your base layer, your Blockin layer? The Blockin layer can be a little bit extensive, yes, if you let it. And in my case, I'm trying to do the right thing from the very onset so as to avoid wasting time in the modeling stages and the detailing stages as well. So the Blockin has to be proper at times. And there's a video that I uploaded a few days ago as well. I mentioned that in the Blockin, you are allowed to make as many mistakes as you want, so long as you know what you're doing. So I think this thigh is a bit bigger than it should be. I mean, I don't know what I was thinking about when I did that. I guess the sketching can be a little bit overdone. But looking at my reference, the tie looks kind of bigger, but I'm going to correct that ahead, not right now. I'm just going to let it sit here, and then later on I shall come and, sculpt it back into the right desired size that I have in mind. And also not just in my mind, also according to the reference. And also please note that the reference is just an inspiration. I'm not trying to really slavishly copy her as a person and make her the subject here. No, this is a totally different creation. This is a new being I'm creating here, and I'm just using her body to actually, the reference body that is, to actually know what to paint. I'm trying to create a human figure here, and this is the torso we are focusing on today. Now here we're gonna paint that cloth that she's wearing, and this line here, this dark line, is to really delineate between the areas that don't catch that light and the areas that catch it. And as you can see, once you put that border black, there's a clear differentiation between the areas that the cloth is on and the places that it's not. And this is something I really paid a close attention to when I began my Blockin in the earlier stages. I do that for the left side as well, to really separate the areas that don't have the cloth and the areas of the cloth. Now, my model was wearing this, and it is only fair for me to use that inspiration of her attire to paint this one as well. Plus, it gives you a rough idea, not even rough, it's a proper idea of how to actually paint cloth that is transparent, a see-through in a way. Now here I'm just all the way down to the left toe, or is it foot? And I'm going to play with my tones here as well, because at the end of the day, it's a game of playing with tones with me. And believe it or not, I'm still blocking these spots in. So we're not done with the Blockin. As soon as I As I'm done with the blocking, I'm going to let you know. I'm on the background area, and with the background, I really have to look at my reference closely and pay attention to what's going on and blur it a bit, because that's not the area of focus. I usually tell my students that when you want to paint a painting, say like a portrait, you have to consider the fact that there's a background and there's a foreground. Now, the reason I began by painting the blurry part is because that forms the, further side of the background. The background involves the front side and the back side, right? Okay, back side came out wrong. The point being that the blurry side represents the part that is far away from view, and the more focused side, which is the front, represents the part that comes closer to the viewer. And this is to really separate that background from the foreground. This is the leg, and it requires some sort of background to really show what's going on, because I don't want the canvas to show through and make it appear as though it's some sort of mannequin or a cartoonish kind of figure. So the background is very important, and it has to be blurry once I'm done here. There are some parts of the background that are not going to be blurry. They're going to be in focus a little bit. In some areas, they're going to be very blurry, especially all the way at the back, towards the back of the figure here that I have. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to correct this lower part of the thigh here because it was bigger than I intended, and so I use a little bit of burnt umber and no, not a little bit, a lot of burnt umber and a little bit of ultramarine blue. So we'd say 3 parts out of 5. I'd say 4 parts burnt umber and 1 part ultramarine blue. And that's what I'm doing. I mixed that and I'm using it to now kind of sculpt away or chip away this part here that I didn't need. I take care of the surrounding elements of the thigh area, and by doing this, I kind of map out the vegetation that she is sitting on. I vary my tones strategically, figure out what's dark, what's mid, and what's high, to also create that 3-dimensional space for that log that she's sitting on, according to the reference. Now, as you can see, usually I lay masses of colors, I lay masses of tone first. I do not use a small brush to kind of map out features. No, I come in broad, and then after I'm done with the broad, I come with this sprayed Bristol brush and kind of dab the surface with varying tones as well, varying tones of green. This way, I create some sort of grassy effect, some mossy effect, some ferny effect on the wood. Then I render softly between the edge of the hand and that log. Now, I'm going to come to this lower extreme area, which is going to be properly covered, just so you know, or as you can see. And I lay my dark tones here. Now, that is a proper ivory black on the border to really delineate between the unclothed area and the area that is clothed. Did I say clothed? I did, didn't I? I said clothed. So that's the cloth. That's the cloth. Cloth. What is it? Let me know. I vary my highlights, and I'm really trying to avoid talking too much at this stage because I'm just going to use the visuals to kind of communicate the technique I'm using here. So, ta-da-da-da, I let it play. Ta-da-da-da, I let it play. I paint away, and it gets better. It gets better. This is what I usually do in the studio. I have a bad voice, and I tend to have a good time in the studio as I paint. So this is just me. I don't know about any other artists out there. I'm not trying to do what people do. I'm just trying to do me, you know? And it's better if you just do you, you know? Just be yourself, be free. Love your process. At the end of the day, photography shows very little of a person, you know? Very little of a person. This, on the other hand, is meant for educational purposes, and this is not photography. This is art. It shows you the technical ability you are capable of as an artist to render something into existence, something of the human form, so to speak, without necessarily relying on a photograph. This is representational just as a photograph would be, but it is handmade. Might I be bold? Carrying on. I render this lower part of the belly and make it as soft as possible. Might I add, this is the modeling stage. As I lay my tones across the surface, I have to also briefly render in between zones and to bring out that realistic effect that I'm trying to bring. The modeling stage is not that different from the blocking stage. Do you know why? Because with the blocking, we already formed that support base that would accommodate the modeling. And in the modeling, you are allowed to still use the wet on wet technique and render in between zones to communicate realism. Now here, I mentioned I'd tell you when I used much more green. Now the green is as a result of burnt umber and deep yellow and a touch of ultramarine blue. This is as a result of that part of the body catching the reflection from the adjacent environment. And please note that it is also within the cloth. So it's kind of darker if you compare it to the surrounding elements or the elements of the skin that border it. I'm sculpting that most lifted areal on the sphere to show that three-dimensional effect and how to bring it into existence, or should I say nipple? The areal, that is. Now, I'm going to render this darker part over here, right in the middle, because it's darker than the lower and the upper area, and to really bring out that sphere. Moving on, I am on the left sphere. And here, I'm doing the same thing I did for the right sphere. Modeling. By using the wet on wet technique, subtly, in an educated manner, with strategy, precision, and in a measured manner whereby I can tell what's dark, what's warm, what's cool, and what's bright. This is a gray tone. This is not pure white, the highlight that you just saw me apply. Now, I am briefly smooshing that darker tone there into its surrounding areas so as to create that softness that will make it appear realistic. This is important. How? Because at the end of the day, I'm trying to create a realistic female torso. Now, coming down, I have mixed a tad bit of ultramarine blue, burnt umber, and titanium white to create these light spots in line with the reference as I apply on top of the modeled cloth that covers the skin underneath. In some areas, I use a little bit more of that, and in some, I spare myself that trouble. Moving on, I now want to model this middle area here. You'd call it a cleavage. I wasn't too loud there, was I? As I lift my tones, I'm paying keen attention to my reference to really communicate that skin area that catches the light more than the surrounding areas. I'm deliberate with my process. And even as I do this, I am not using my lightest light. This is a gray tone. And as I apply it here, I notice that I haven't mentioned it is not the gray that you think. This is like titanium white, burnt umber, and a tad bit of red crimson, and a tad bit of yellow lemon hue. Now, moving up, because I'm layering on the modeling stage, as you know, the modeling is the second layer, I am varying my tones nicely, adding some more burnt umber and deep yellow to catch that shadow. Now, it is still okay for you to paint one feature on top of the other at this point, as I mentioned, because it is a wet on wet kind of technique, and there's a feel for it. There's a feeling when you do this, because you just know that you are right, however hard you press your canvas against the surface, because it's allowed. And I don't know the chemistry around that, but it works. However hard, however smooth, you do you. Feel free. Enjoy the process. Always. I'm varying my tones on the neck area, the area that I began with when I began painting the torso. And this dark here is burnt umber pure. As I lay it on the surface, I render as I go. Please note, the upper part of the face is already complete, and so I'm not dealing with that today. We're only talking about the torso. And as the neck is part of the torso, as it extends from the shoulder up, it is only fair to talk about it as well. So vary your tones and watch your reference. Handle your brush with confidence, render across the surface, and be soft where you need to be soft and hard when you need to be free with your brush. As you can see, I'm rendering between the light areas and the darker areas. I have to create that smoothness and softness for me to properly communicate the skin and the porcelain look of the human figure. As I do this, something begins to happen. The effect I'm aiming for begins to peek its head, and I'm beginning to get happy with my process. That is a lie. I began getting happy from the very onset of this project. But here, I guess it's called excitement increased. Now, as you can see, I'm using this brush of mine that has some sort of dagger appearance, and it is soft to the touch. It is what I used to render across this area, because it's kind of slimmer at the top of the bristles, and it allows me to pass or navigate areas which my round smooshing brush can't possibly fit. Now, I'm reinstating that modeling of the chest area with some more paint. I lift my highlights even further to communicate lights within the shadow. I shall come back and render yet again. wet on wet. This enhances the realism even further. That's what I'm talking about. As you can see, I still have the legs and arms to go. But as I am talking about the torso, let's get back to painting. Just behind the armpit, I add a little more of that burnt umber and mix it with a tad bit of deep yellow to communicate the shadow. And right above the sphere, I use more titanium white. On the shoulder, I do the same as well. This is important how? To communicate the spherical effect of the shoulder area and to enhance realism. I use my smooshing brush to soften things up, and this is the result. As you can see, the skin begins to look seamless, yet it is just the quality of paint that allows me to achieve this effect, and rendering to the level that I get my satisfaction. Even without overdoing, the paint itself will do the work for you. Now I reinstate the dark edge of this cloth to really reduce that painterly effect to a bit, though it is also very important to show that the painterly effect. I come back to the thigh and begin modeling it, as I want to really communicate the natural tone of this part of the skin. The skin is a continuous, endless veil that surrounds the human body, all the way to the legs. The same skin that's on the face is on this area I'm working on right now. It is just an extension. It's an extension. I am lifting my highlights right below that shadow and really varying my tones and render as I go. As you can see, the broad brush strokes that were laid earlier strategically around the hip area are now being rendered to capture that continuous veil of the skin and make it seamlessly one, as it is one. I am enjoying this process because as I do this, I feel as though I am holding some sort of chisel and curving my way around this cylinder part of the human body to the lower extremity. My brush has turned into a chisel, chiseling away at the marble block with confidence and enjoyment. As I mentioned earlier, you have to make sure to enjoy your process and really see what's going on and pay close attention to anatomy. This way, you will know if you are doing the right thing or not. As I render between these zones, I realized that I laid down the tones just right, so as to play with them here by rendering them all together and bringing them into one skin. As you do this, the skin itself fragments itself to a micro level, so as to capture that effect that is natural and seamlessly real. I do this until I achieve that level of realism that I intend to achieve. As you can see, I blend between the cooler areas and the warmer areas to bring it all together. I'm trying to eliminate any hard edge or something that is not properly done to really communicate the skin of a human being. Now I'm getting to a level here where I am beginning to really appreciate the far we've come. As you take a look at this, you realize that the torso is done. The paint here is still wet, and I'm just going to let it to sit for a while and dry. And as of the recording, this painting, so to speak, is not complete because the edges have to be reworked. That will come in a later video. Now this part is very important. If you feel as though you're stuck and you want to move to the next level, apply for a one-on-one coaching call with me. The link is down below. This free 30-minute coaching call with me will be centered around you, because honestly, I prefer to build a program that makes you build your art and improve your general painting experience dramatically within the shortest time possible. I'll get to understand what frustrates you the most about your art progress, and I'll also understand what it would mean for you to paint something that actually moves people. And my question is this: if you had a magic wand, what would your career look like in 6 months? Your art career, that is. More like a month, because this process will take a little time and you shall improve your art dramatically. Also, I have a waitlist. Why is joining my waitlist so important, I hear you ask? Here, I get to treat you like a subscriber on my website. You get to hear of these YouTube tutorials and free tutorials on my website ahead of anyone else. Thank you for watching, and I can't wait to see what you create. See you on the next one.